Imagine a world without refrigerators, no quick snacks from the freezer, no fresh meat conveniently chilled. My Nonni lived this reality every day. Today, I'll share her secret ways of preserving meat. No electricity required, just old-fashioned wisdom and love. Life before refrigerators. Today, it's hard to imagine storing food without fridges. But when Nonni was young, refrigeration was rare. She often shared stories around the dinner table about those days. Fresh meat couldn't stay fresh for long, especially during the hot summer months, so families like hers had to be resourceful and creative. Nonni described how preserving meat became part of their routine, almost a family ritual. Each method she learned was handed down from her parents, who learned from theirs. Without modern gadgets, they relied on salt, smoke, sun, vinegar, fermentation, and sometimes fat. These weren't fancy techniques, just practical ways that had worked for generations. Nonni loved saying, "We respected food because wasting it meant going hungry." This mindset shaped how they treated each piece of meat with great care and gratitude. Today, I'll share those fascinating, simple methods Nonni trusted to keep food safe, delicious, and nourishing year-round. These stories aren't just lessons. They're a celebration of old-world ingenuity and family bonds that kept communities strong. Salting and curing meat. Nonni often called salt the magic white crystal. She taught me that before refrigeration, salt wasn't just seasoning, it was survival. After slaughtering pigs or cows, her family carefully cleaned the meat, removing every bit of blood. They then covered each piece thoroughly with coarse salt, meticulously rubbing it into every crevice and fold. Salt, she explained, pulls out moisture, preventing bacteria from thriving. After salting, they'd layer the meat in large containers, wooden barrels, or ceramic crocks, pressing heavy weights on top to squeeze out extra moisture. Nonni mentioned how sometimes they'd add herbs like rosemary, thyme, or spices like pepper and coriander seeds to enhance the flavor. Gradually, the meat lost moisture, becoming firm, dense, and incredibly flavorful. This salt-cured meat tasted salty and rich, perfect for slicing thinly onto homemade bread or simmering slowly in hearty soups or stews. Nonni vividly remembered her mother's skilled hands carefully slicing salted pork for Sunday dinner. Each bite carried not only a rich flavor but also stories of resourcefulness, patience, and a deep respect for food. Smoking meat the old way. Nonni always said smoking meat was as much a celebration as a chore, a true community event that brought everyone together. After salting pork or venison for days, they'd carefully thread each piece onto wooden racks or hooks and carry them into the smokehouse, a simple, sturdy shed her father built behind the house. Inside, a small pit held smoldering fruit wood or hickory, chosen for its sweet aroma. The trick was to keep the wood glowing, not flaming, so they'd rake the coals and feed tiny sticks into the embers, coaxing out thin ribbons of fragrant smoke. For 3 or 4 days straight, someone stood watch. Nonni remembered how her father would rise at midnight, pull on a worn coat, and step into the starry cold to poke at the fire, making sure it stayed low and steady. Meanwhile, her mother whispered old prayers for protection as she closed the heavy wooden door at dusk. Outside, cousins and neighbors gathered around barrels of cider and bowls of cheese, swapping stories and cheering each other on. Walking back to the house at dawn, Nonni felt proud knowing her family had worked side by side to create something special. Inside the smokehouse, meat slowly took on a deep mahogany hue and soaked in layers of complex flavor. More than a taste enhancer, smoke formed a natural barrier that discouraged bacteria, so sausages and hams could hang for months without spoiling. On holidays, slicing into a smoked ham became a ritual, the first crack of the knife through the firm rind, the hush that followed as warm steam and smoky scents curled up into the kitchen air. "The flavor was our reward for patience," Nonni would say, her eyes shining. Every bite carried the warmth of community, the echo of laughter by the smokehouse door, and the timeless wisdom of generations who knew that good things really do take time. Air drying and sun drying. One of Nonni's favorite ways to preserve meat didn't require fire, jars, or fancy tools. Just the sun, a good breeze, and plenty of patience. On cloudless days with dry air, she and her mother would prepare thin strips of beef or venison, trimming off excess fat and seasoning each piece with a sprinkle of salt, black pepper, and sometimes a dash of crushed rosemary or thyme. Then they'd lay the slices out on clean cotton sheets, stretched across wooden frames or carefully arranged wire racks. Nonni said finding the right spot was just as important as slicing the meat. They needed an area with full sun, but also a steady breeze, something to keep the air moving, which helped dry the meat faster and kept the flies away. Sometimes they'd hang netting overhead or burn a bit of sage nearby to discourage bugs from coming too close. Then they'd watch and wait. She remembered sitting nearby, shelling peas or sewing by hand as the meat slowly changed before her eyes. Over the course of a few days, it would darken, shrink, and firm up into dry, chewy strips, what we might now call homemade jerky. The result was delicious, smoky from the air, savory from the seasonings, and tough enough to last weeks wrapped in a cloth bag. This sun-dried meat became a trusted food on long family journeys or during lean seasons. Nonni said it gave them strength when meals were scarce, and each bite reminded her of home. "The sun did the work," she'd say, smiling. She always believed that drying meat this way connected them to the rhythm of the land, trusting nature's heat, honoring time, and never rushing the process. It was slow food, made with care and respect, long before those became trendy terms. Preserving meat in lard, confit. One fascinating method Nonni shared involved cooking pork and storing it in lard. She called it confit, a fancy French term for a very practical, age-old method. After salting pork pieces overnight to season and preserve them initially, Nonni's family gently cooked these pieces in rendered pork fat, simmering them until incredibly tender. Once fully cooked, the pork was placed into glass jars or stoneware crocks, completely covered with more melted fat, sealing out any air. As the fat cooled and solidified, it formed a natural, airtight seal. Stored in their cool cellar, these jars kept meat fresh and flavorful for months. When ready to eat, they'd scoop pork from under the lard, warming it slightly, and serving tender, flavorful meat that tasted freshly cooked. Nonni laughed, recalling neighbors' astonishment at how fresh and juicy their pork tasted, never suspecting it had been preserved months earlier. She proudly told me, "Fat was our refrigerator." Each jar wasn't just food. It symbolized the ingenuity, practicality, and resourcefulness of a generation who lived simply yet abundantly, with careful respect for each morsel. Pickling meat with vinegar or wine. Another popular method Nonni described was pickling meat using vinegar or wine. Her mother often preserved meat by packing chunks of beef or pork into large jars or crocks, completely submerging them in vinegar mixed with herbs, spices, garlic, and occasionally onions or peppers for added flavor. The strong acidity of vinegar prevented harmful bacteria from growing, keeping meat safely preserved for months. Nonni enjoyed recalling how pickled pork, sliced thinly, had a delightful tang that enhanced salads or sandwiches. Another variation involved raw sausages preserved by immersing them in red wine. The alcohol, combined with natural acidity, preserved the meat, imparting a unique, deep flavor that intensified over time. She described the deliciously tangy aroma released when opening these crocks months later, instantly filling their home with warmth and anticipation. Pickling taught Nonni profound respect for food preservation, creatively enhancing flavors while ensuring survival through harsh times. She often said, "Vinegar wasn't just for salads, it kept us alive." Each preserved jar symbolized her mother's care and cleverness, a flavorful legacy passed lovingly through generations. Fermenting meat, Old World sausages. Nonni made fermentation sound like magic, though for her, it was just a simple, reliable tradition. They'd grind pork or beef finely, mix in salt, garlic, spices like paprika and fennel seeds, and stuff this mixture into natural casings. The sausages were then hung in their cool cellar, allowing naturally present bacteria to slowly ferment the meat, preserving it safely without modern refrigeration. Over weeks, these sausages transformed dramatically, shrinking, firming, and developing deep, complex flavors impossible to replicate with store-bought products. Nonni's stories painted vivid images of the excitement and anticipation as they checked fermenting sausages daily, each passing day bringing them closer to delicious readiness. Nonni's salami wasn't just food. It connected her family to ancestors, diverse cultures, and timeless traditions. Biting into a slice meant tasting patience, heritage, and love. Nonni proudly said, "Our sausages tasted real because they were real." Through her stories, fermentation became more than just preservation. It was about keeping cultural heritage alive, savoring authentic tastes, and continuing traditions that connected countless generations. The tools of the trade. What Nonni used. Nonni didn't need fancy gadgets or digital timers. Her tools were simple, sturdy, and often handmade. She used large wooden barrels for salting. Their rough interiors aged with flavor from decades of use. The barrels were stored in the cellar, carefully cleaned and reused year after year. For confit or pickling, she relied on heavy stoneware crocks or wide-mouthed glass jars with wax-sealed lids. These kept air and pests out without the need for electricity or plastic. When it came to drying meat, Nonni used old wooden racks her father built, their slats smoothed by years of wiping and wear. Sometimes, she'd lay thin meat strips on clean, stretched-out cotton sheets placed under a shaded tree, nature's dehydrator. For cutting, she had a long, curved knife with a wooden handle, worn down from years of slicing sausages and salted pork. That knife was never far from reach during winter prep. These humble tools, passed down and well-loved, weren't just equipment. They were part of the story. Every nick, every stain had a memory. Nonni often said, "Our hands and our tools, those were the only machines we needed." These tools made the work personal and connected her to the generations before. Why it was healthier. Nonni's meat versus today's. Nonni never added chemicals, preservatives, or artificial colors to her food. Just salt, smoke, fat, herbs, and thyme. And that made a big difference. Unlike many store-bought meats today, which are packed with nitrates, stabilizers, and sugars, Nonni's preserved meats were as close to natural as you could get. No unpronounceable ingredients, just what they had on hand and what their bodies could handle. She believed in using every part of the animal, which meant her family got a variety of nutrients: collagen from bones, iron from organ meats, and healthy fats from lard. The drying and curing processes didn't strip the meat of its nutrition. In fact, they concentrated flavors and preserved essential minerals and proteins. Also, because preservation was a slow process, they ate meat in moderation and savored every bite. Meals were balanced with hearty vegetables, beans, and grains, not overloaded with processed sugars or factory-seasoned sauces. Nonni's meals may have been humble, but they were nourishing and full of life. In many ways, her preservation methods align with modern clean eating and whole foods trends. Nonni wasn't following a diet. She was just living the way her people always had, and it kept them strong. Old versus new, what we've lost and could regain. Nonni used to chuckle when people raved about store-bought sausages or vacuum-packed jerky. "They taste like plastic," she'd whisper with a wink. Her smoked meats were richer, deeper, and more satisfying, not because they were fancier, but because they were real. The flavor came from time, care, and simple ingredients. No artificial smoke flavoring, just wood, patience, and love. Modern refrigerators are convenient, but they've made us forget how to listen to nature. Nonni's cellar stayed cool without a plug. Stone walls, deep ground, and a damp cloth over a crock did the job. It was sustainable before the word even existed. No hum of a compressor, no energy bill, just cool air and trust in tradition. Even health-wise, modern meats often include additives that can affect digestion and long-term health. Nonni's methods, by contrast, kept things natural. She understood how to prevent spoilage without chemicals, relying on observation and instinct passed down through generations. While we've gained speed and convenience, we've also lost a deep connection to our food. Reclaiming even a piece of those old ways, sun-drying, pickling, cellaring, might just bring flavor, health, and meaning back to our modern kitchens. Cool and dark storage. Nonni's cellar. Preservation methods weren't complete without proper storage. Nonni often described their cellar as the heart of their preservation process. With stone walls dug into the ground beneath their home, temperatures remained cool and stable year-round, providing the ideal conditions for preserving food. She fondly remembered shelves neatly lined with salted and smoked meats, jars of pickled pork, crocks filled with meat preserved in lard. Smoked sausages hung proudly from the ceilings, while dried meats were carefully wrapped in cloth and arranged neatly on wooden racks. Nonni said warmly, "Without our cellar, none of this would have worked. It was our refrigerator." She spoke respectfully of the space that kept their food safe, reinforcing the importance of working with nature, using naturally cool environments for food preservation. Her stories taught profound respect for food and the environment alike, emphasizing cooperation rather than conflict with nature. Nonni's cellar wasn't just storage. It symbolized family security, resilience, and ingenuity passed down lovingly through generations, ensuring survival and nourishment through every season. Cold stream immersion. In spring, when the mountain snow melted, Nonni's family turned to the chilly stream behind their house. Early each morning, she and her cousins would wrap slices of meat in clean cotton cloth, tie them securely, and lower the bundles into the flowing water. As the stream swept by, it drew heat from the meat faster than still air could, keeping it just above freezing without ever turning to ice. Nonni laughed about playing hide-and-seek among the rocks while the meat soaked. She and her brother knew exactly when to pull it out, usually by late morning when distant hills warmed with sunlight. The cloth came away damp and cold, the meat firm but not frozen. They patted it dry, then hung it in a shady barn corner. Over the next few days, it stayed fresh and safe to eat, perfect for mid-morning snacks or quick stews. What made this work wasn't fancy science, just physics. Moving water conducts heat away more efficiently than air, and cotton cloth served as a filter, letting the cold in while keeping out leaves, insects, and grit. The ritual taught Nonni respect for nature's gifts. Her childhood memories tied play and preservation in one sweet package. This method was ideal on busy farm days. No salt, no smoke, no fat required, just clean cloth, cold water, and Mother Nature's own refrigerator. And each chilly morning by the stream became a lesson in simplicity, resourcefulness, and how to harness the elements without a plug or a power bill. Claypot refrigeration. Long before electric coolers, Nonni's grandmother had a clever invention, the pot-in-pot cooler. She'd nest a smaller clay pot inside a larger one, fill the gap with damp sand, and cover it all with a cloth lid. As the water in the sand evaporated through the porous outer pot, it drew heat from the inner pot, chilling its contents by up to 10 degrees below room temperature. Nonni remembered how the pots sweated tiny droplets on their surfaces, evidence that the system was working. They kept salted or confit meat in the inner pot, checking daily and sprinkling fresh water on the sand to keep it damp. In the humid summer kitchen, they placed the cooler near an open window so breezes would speed evaporation. By evening, the meat always felt pleasantly cool enough to stay fresh for 2 or 3 more days. Making these pots was a family craft. Her father dug clay from the riverbank, and Grandma shaped and fired it in a simple outdoor kiln. When small cracks appeared, they patched them with clay slip, extending each pot's life for years. This method taught Nonni that smart design, not electricity, could solve everyday problems. And every time she lifted the heavy lid and felt that chill radiate out, she felt connected to her grandmother's hands and to a centuries-old tradition of doing more with less. Wax sealing. The fat tomb. Beeswax was another precious resource in Nonni's toolkit. After packing cured meat or confit into jars, her family melted pure beeswax and carefully poured a thin seal over the top. The hardened wax created an airtight, fat tomb, keeping air, bugs, and mold at bay, without plastic wrap or metal lids. Nonni loved the ritual of sealing. Grandma would tilt the jar, spoon the golden wax around the rim in one smooth motion, then lay a piece of cloth over it while still tacky. Within seconds, the wax set, glowing like a miniature sunset under the cellar's lantern. This method worked especially well on meats stored in fat. Once sealed, jars could sit for months in the cellar, sometimes up to a year, without spoilage. When winter arrived, cracking open a wax seal felt ceremonial. A satisfying pop, and the rich aroma of meat and honeyed wax would fill the air. Maintaining a supply of clean beeswax meant beekeeping all summer. They harvested the comb gently, rendering the old cells for sealing new batches. It was a cycle of care. The bees provided wax, the family preserved meat, and the community stayed well fed through lean months. Ash and salt cure. During long winter days, the wood stove in Nonni's home produced piles of clean ash. Instead of tossing it, her family mixed sifted ash with coarse salt to make a powerful preservative coating. They dusted meat pieces lightly in this blend, wrapped them in cloth, and hung them in the loft. Ash draws moisture away and neutralizes acids that bacteria love. Paired with salt's osmotic power, it created a dry, hostile environment for spoilage. The ash also lent a subtle earthy note. Think of a faint campfire aroma rather than chemical smokiness. Getting the ash just right was an art. Too coarse, and it felt gritty. Too fine, and it lost absorbency. Grandma would test each batch by rubbing some between her fingers. Only the softest, purest snuff made the cut. Using ash showed Nonni how nothing on the farm was truly wasted. Every bit of wood burned in the stove became a tool in their preservation arsenal, another testament to the resourcefulness that defined her childhood. Underground pit coolers. When the cellar filled up, they turned to the earth itself. Nonni's family dug shallow pits in shaded spots, lined them with flat stones and straw, then buried covered meat containers, clay pots or wooden boxes, under layers of straw and soil. The ground stayed at a stable, cool temperature year-round, buffering against scorching summers or freezing winters. A small drainage trench at one end kept water from pooling. Each morning, they'd mark the spot with a rock cairn and trust the earth to guard their provisions. Opening the pit was like unearthing buried treasure. Jars of pickled pork or coffee emerged, still chilled, ready for stews or slicing. The method required no tools beyond a shovel and some straw, yet could preserve months' worth of meat with zero electricity. Pit cooling taught Nonni an enduring lesson. Sometimes, the simplest solutions lie just beneath our feet. Nature's basement, free and reliable. Ice harvesting and seasonal ice storage. In the dead of winter, when streams froze solid, Nonni's family harvested blocks of ice. Wrapped in burlap and hauled home on wooden sleds, the blocks went into a corner of the root cellar, stacked beneath straw. As they slowly melted, they kept the cellar air cold and dry, ideal for cured hams and sausage. They never let ice touch the meat directly, always insulating with straw or wood slats, so no frostbite ruined the flavor. A small drain channeled meltwater outside. This ice supply extended the natural refrigerator well into spring. Even as outside temperatures rose, the melting ice held the cellar at near freezing for weeks. Carrying those heavy blocks taught Nonni endurance and teamwork. But more than that, it showed her how each season contributes its own gift. Winter's cold, stored away to nourish the family year-round. Now, you know Nonni's secrets to preserving meat without refrigeration. These methods sustained her family, kept traditions alive, and built bonds between generations. Have you ever tried these techniques? Share your stories and subscribe for more timeless wisdom.